All right, everybody. Stocks by the numbers. Welcome back. Quick update on Lithium Americas Corporation, ticker symbol LAC, listed here on the New York Stock Exchange. Stock had a big run today, along with a lot of the other metals and materials that we just looked at, up to 272, about a third of a point, roughly 13% on the day. Still up a couple of cents here after hours, potentially going back to that previous support trend line that we looked at. So here in the technicals, you can see we had a little bit of a gap down. We were trending downward. We go into these earnings, loss a little less than expected. We continue downward. We had the descending wedge forming. I said, in my opinion, you might see a run up back up to this moving average here, 320, 3.25. Stock runs up, basically immediately rejects, drops back down, starts to channel up here going into earnings. Technically a very, very slight miss. But stock, for the most part, just kind of had it up, had it down, kind of evened out here in the low twos. Then, September 11th, we actually had news of China supposedly suspending 2 mines here. Lithium miners gain after China's CATL says it will adjust production. Says it plans to make adjustments. A UBS report earlier said CATL suspended 2 mines. We had ALB up 10% on the news on that day. And then, of course, we had LAC and even Sigma Lithium climbing 6%, 15% on that news. And you can see that was right here. We were trending downward, channeling down into September 10th. And then on the 11th, we had a pop up basically touching that trend line. Then you can see we kind of flattened out. And then we started to rally up. I drew out this trend line here. We have a couple of trend lines going back to middle of April when we had that gap down. And you can see top line resistance here, top of the screen, 490, 490, 489. So I went from 489 cutting across to that top right there, May 15th, boom. So that's technically our top line resistance here going back to April. If we go from the next high, May 15th, 24, and I just cut that down across right there to those highs, about the 3rd week of August, 22nd, 23rd of August. And you can see that cuts down across, and the stock was bouncing and fighting to get back above that trend line, sitting right at it. And then today, boom, we had the big pop, of course, of almost 12%, 13%, I mean. But overall, this is, again, what we speak about. Now, this could be just a short-term reaction off of both of those catalysts, like we said, right? If China technically is mining a little less lithium, then basically every other company who is involved in lithium is going to see a little bump, and that's basically what happened. And now, again, today, we recently had news of the Chinese stimulus injection, and that basically sent almost all of our metals, all of our material stocks significantly higher today, 8, 9, 12% across the board. So good news for LAC here in the short term. And technically, again, like I said, even if we come here, you can see like we're making like these lower highs here. So we have some tightening taking place. But this was, what do we have? 327 was our high. And if we cut down across, again, connecting to those tops, that's like bang right there. And you can see that technically we just jumped up above that resistance going back to mid-July that we got up above. And I spoke about this support level last time, going from the bottoms of August 5th, 25, connecting to those bottoms there, the 12th, the 13th. And you can see the stock came right down to it and then tried to hold it and ended up rejecting, tried to retrace above that support trend line and rejected. And now it's almost back there. So tomorrow, it looks like that trend line maybe like 282, 281. So if LAC is up another couple of cents tomorrow, if it can gain like a dime, then we can potentially pop up back above this support trend line and close above it, which would, of course, signal bullish momentum. And we might continue to bounce up like this and get back to 320, 340, maybe even 3.5 here at this resistance trend line. But again, LAC, we know that they're still trying to get into production. And we know the timeline, I believe, we're looking at maybe like 2026 or something, if memory serves correct. So, of course, going into this one, I want you to keep in mind that this is a longer term play. But the reason why so many people are pumped about it, and a lot of analysts see some nice growth over the upcoming years, is because they're supposedly they're kind of setting themselves up to be one of the largest, if not the largest, lithium producer in North America. And you've been seeing this recently here with a lot of the news and updates coming out from a lot of companies across a bunch of different sectors, talking about trying to shift some of these imports of certain technologies, certain materials, certain minerals. We want to shift this more towards under our domestic control, right? That's what we're starting to see here lately, especially over, I'd say, about the last year or so. So that's why something like LAC, can it be volatile? If markets really sell off, could this drop down, 40, 50% from where it is down into the dollars? Yeah, of course. Everything could sell off at a moment's notice. We know this. But the company is holding, a handful of assets on its balance sheet that I think is kind of buoying the stock up here and holding that $2 level. We looked at the quote unquote fair value, and it was kind of like right around this point, if memory serves correct. So that's why even in the short term, they could bounce it and bring it down into these little wedges and these little consolidating channels. But it kind of inevitably has to pop back up. And that's why even if we stay flat here, it might be boring potentially for the next year and a half until we start to get like updates on this timeline, and we have these little catalyst news headlines coming in to help bump up the stock. But right now, in my opinion, again, based on the projections of LAC, if you're telling me, hey, listen, I had a couple of grand, I'm parking it into LAC shares down here at the twos. I think it's, fair valued, maybe even slightly overvalued, and I could see it dropping to 230, 220. But I think that, 3 years from now, I think we're going to turn around and they're going to start churning out that lithium, and it's going to be, a great stock that everyone's going to talk about, and everyone's going to want to own a domestic lithium miner. So, if you're bullish on this one, I can appreciate where you're coming from. And more than likely, I'd say it's probably going to pay off unless they seriously run into some red tape or something. But in my opinion, I think that everything moves along swimmingly. They recently had, forgive my memory, I think it was like 2.3 billion from the DOE, right? So we're making the investments into our domestic supplies here. That's what you're seeing. But here off this pop, market cap 592 mil. EPS, it's basically been in line. We don't have any revenue. How's everyone forecasting this stock? Okay, we have one price target, 253, which is basically where the stock has been for the most part recently. Average price target on an LAC, 583. Highest price target over 10.5. And you can see we have 14 analysts currently covering the position. All 14 of them are either giving it a buy, strong buy, or a hold rating. No one is advising their clients to sell or to kind of stay away from this stock. And again, as we laid out, kind of makes sense to me as well, because it'd be hard to bet against this company unless, of course, we hear news, we're not allowing them at all to mine at the Thacker Pass location in Nevada, and, it basically just spoils all of their plans. You know what I mean? Unless you get a headline like that, then chances are everyone's just kind of accumulating shares. We're in wait and see mode. And then once we hear news of, now the facility is up and running, now we're operational, now, we're planning to start mining in, 3 months. Well, once you start getting those headlines, that's when the eyes are going to come back on LAC, and that's when the money flow is probably going to start increasing as well. But we can see total assets minus total liabilities yields total equity, and we can see the liabilities are very, very cheap here for this company. We were up to about 100 million almost, but we were over a 3-to-1 ratio. But you can see we've just been chipping down away at these liabilities. We're sitting here a touch below 30 mil, and we have our assets here approaching 700 million. Our book value right now is up to 305 a share, which is roughly 10% higher than where the stock is currently trading. Again, book value is if the company had to close its doors and liquidate everything in its name, what would the stock be worth? And you can see technically worth more than it currently is right now. So we're operating at a loss. Cash was dwindling down here to sub 150. Boom, we got big cash injection coming in, 375 mil we're holding on hand. Free cash flow is up about 10%. Oh, no, wait. That's Q1. So Q2 this time last year, we lost 48.5 mil. And this quarter they just reported, they lost 31.7 million of the free cash flow. So these losses are getting a little bit tighter and tighter, but we can also see the debt again. The debt was up here, tens of millions, and now we brought it down 3 million, 4 million. So now it's a drop in the bucket. Again, we have assets heavily outweighing liabilities in both the short and the long term. So that's why if we really look at the fair value, we have 370 million in cash. Equity here, 664. We really don't have any debt. I mean, that's why, in my opinion, right now, but even if you want to negate the value because they're operating at a loss and because they still need more time. So even if that is worth, like 100 mil, 150 million in value, let's say, hypothetically, right? 300 million in cash, 664 equity. Now, we're up to almost $1 billion, which is obviously, like 70% higher than where we're currently trading, almost a double, right? And that's why I think I personally put fair value in this stock. I think it was like 4.25 or something, if memory serves correct. So that's why, in my opinion, you may be asking yourself, well, if in the numbers we could value the stock at 4, and in the fundamentals they're valuing the book value at 3, why is the stock in the 2s? Very legitimate question. And I think, again, what it comes down to is the fact that, remember, lithium prices were dropping after the big, EV hype boom coming out of the lockdowns, right? We had all EV producers and all of these lithium miners, all of those stocks were raging really for like 21, 22, and then they started to sell off, right? After lithium topped out and started to pull back in value, we started to see headlines, EV production, EV demand may be slowing, right? Remember all those articles coming out? And you had basically all of them across the board, NIO, Rivian, Tesla, they all started to drop down. Lithium prices started to drop. Stocks like LAC started to pull back drastically. So in the moment, they can keep it down. However, at the end of the day, in reality, over the longer term, in my opinion, I view this as an opportunity, especially when just looking at the numbers, right? If we say, hypothetically, we didn't have any of these numbers to look at and we were just going off the story, going off the hype, well, then we could probably all agree, well, most of us could agree that, yes, like we said, domestic lithium mining operation, once they start moving a couple of years down the road, it's probably going to be worth owning. Everyone's going to talk about it, so I'm going to buy it now. Makes sense. But on the flip side of that coin, if we also turned around and said, yeah, it's a great story and it has a good chance to work out, however, it still needs like 1.5 years, right? Now, when you look at that time, you can say, like we said, with some other stocks, you kind of come to that conclusion where, yeah, we might not have the urgency right here in the moment to step in and buy the shares, right? So that's why I think, in my opinion, something like LAC has just been quiet. Because I feel like people are probably pretty confident that it could work out and they kind of should have a position. But I think that they just looked at the time frame and they said, you know what, I'm going to do some other things. I'm going to do some trading, or I'm going to jump into, some tech stocks like an AMD or something, and I'll ride that wave. I'll make some money there, and I'll keep LAC on the watch list, and I'll come back to it maybe in 3 months, maybe in 6 months, And even if I can buy it at 3 or, 310, 320, it wouldn't be getting away from me too much. But once I lock the funds in for the longer term, it could potentially be, closer along that timeline. And my apologies, I don't remember what they said the next kind of catalyst was going to be. We looked at it previously. GM faced delays in closing $330 million deal. Mutually beneficial solutions on the review. Let's see this. Tranche 2. Both parties are looking for mutually beneficial solutions. Was initially structured as an equity deal, but with Lithium Americas share price far below expectations, both companies have agreed to extend the decision-making process until year end. In my opinion, I have to say right now, especially after getting a couple of bills from the DOE, in my opinion, this affects GM more than LAC. The original plan was for GM to invest in LAC at a conversion price based on the lower of either Lithium Americas stock's 5-day volume-weighted average price or $17.36 per share. With Lithium Americas VWAP hovering around 2.5, the equity investment would result in, quote, highly dilutive outcomes, potentially pushing GM ownership above the 50% threshold. The significant equity stake could alter the dynamics between the companies. Yes, of course, because you don't want to give up controlling interests, which of course is 51% or higher in a business. Both companies have agreed not to close or cancel the tranche 2 investment during the extension period as they evaluate, quote, mutually beneficial solutions. The delay also affects the timeline for the U.S. Department of Energy loan up, which is critical for the full funding of the Thacker Pass project. Okay. Pointed out that closing both the tranche, the tranche 2 investment and the DOE loan are, quote, contingent upon each other. Okay, so, interestingly enough, so the DOE and supposedly GM are now kind of hesitating, and we're stepping back for a moment because LAC share price has gone so low. But again, LAC share price went so low because, as we said, they need more time, and lithium prices have started to drop down. So now both of these parties are now kind of sitting on their hands in wait-and-see mode. So in my opinion, what that tells me is, first of all, being that the DOE made the announcement of the loan, we said already, in my opinion anyway, that that is a significantly big green flag. So now what I think is going to happen, believe it or not, I think that this company is going to retrace back to where it was. And I think that it is almost inevitable that this stock now goes higher to make all parties involved kind of settle down a little bit, if you will. Obviously, it won't be that, quote, highly dilutive situation if the stock gets back up to 4 or 5, right? So we'll be able to not give up that 50+% stake to GM on that tranche 2. And I'm thinking, I honestly think it goes back to that like fair value that we were looking at. I think it does go back up to north of $4 a share here in the shorter term. And then once it does, you may hear the announcement, okay, GM, we're not delayed anymore. We're going through with the tranche 2 investment. That's what I think is going to happen. And of course, first here in the technicals, we get back above this support trend line potentially in the next day or two, which is going to be here like the high 2s, the 280s. And then even if we rally back up here to this resistance, you're looking at about 3.5. And even if we get back to our tops here, you can see we're at mid 4. And while it seems like a big move, we did look at the numbers of the assets they're holding, a couple of $100 million in cash, and even if we want to penalize them, 150 mil for their timeline and lithium price decrease, we still have to have that fair valuation. And that's why I said even back here, in my opinion, that they brought it down to the very low 2s, but I feel they can't completely decimate it because there is value there. And again, the DOE loan, just the announcement, shows value. So, in my opinion, I think it goes back up. And I think, again, they just kind of readjust and reassess that situation there, GM. And I think it goes through. Shares of lithium miners fall on oversupply. See what I mean? Like all of a sudden we started hearing that. It was all about lithium. It was all about EVs. Then all of a sudden we have enough lithium. Lithium drops in value. Oh, EV demand might be stagnating, right? So then all lithium prices, all these lithium miners started to drop down. Actually, when's the last time we looked at the stock? How about that? How about that? August 30th, my birthday. That was when we looked at it. Right, we had the news initially coming out of the delay. Extend deadline until end of the year. Okay, so again, also, not to bring politics into it, but I know Trump right now is the front runner, and we know that Trump is, America first, and we have to take care of ourselves, first and foremost, and then we can, help out the rest of the world as they need it. But I think that I have a feeling, I mean, we could say, right? I mean, granted, it's a good excuse, if you will, right? The stock went too low, so if we push through this GM deal, you're going to be, over a 50% ownership stake. So we can't do that right now. That's understandable, right? In business, in the numbers, I can appreciate that. But also at the same time, I just have a feeling that they're just waiting for the elections to pass. They're waiting for the elections to pass. And I also feel that it's kind of a win-win, right? Because I know Trump is like, well, I don't like the EV mandate, right? And we should be allowed to choose if we want, just an old school gas combustible engine, if we want the hybrids like the Prius and whatnot, any type of engine that we can make, if it's obviously, safe for the road and you're able to drive it, then we should be able to choose whatever kind of vehicle we want. And that kind of that freedom, in my opinion, will show us value here, believe it or not. Because people forget also that we use lithium ion batteries now in, a bunch of our technologies and whatnot, of devices across the board. So people think it's just tied to electric vehicles. It's not. It's a much, much bigger market than people think. And also, on the flip side, right, you just kind of made the argument for Trump that if he wins, this could be good for LAC. And now on the flip side, Harris, I know they're kind of hell-bent on the EV mandate, right? They kind of want to eliminate all the old school vehicles and they want to strictly be electric vehicles with this whole going green agenda, right? So hypothetically, if Harris wins, then we know that people may be forced to buy electric vehicles, which of course run off of lithium batteries, which of course need lithium, right? So kind of regardless of which candidate wins, LAC might be fine. And none of this may be an issue. So that's why, again, in my opinion, I understand it pulled back. A lot of people are like, oh, what's going to happen now with this GM delay? But in my opinion, again, especially with like we said, the Chinese stimulus money coming in, and we're seeing the bump today in our metals, our materials. I think that, we give it some time. It gets back up to $3.5, $4 a share. They reevaluate the tranche 2 investment. If it's below that 50% ownership stake threshold, I think it gets pushed through. And again, kind of regardless of which candidate we may be pulling for, we could kind of make the argument for either one of them to give us value here over the next couple of years. But let's look at stock charts real quick. I'll let you go. You can see Bollinger Bands were tightening up. Top BB, 262. Stock sitting here, 272. So we can continue to break up and keep going. Again, it looks like this trend line is the one to regain maybe 282, 285. But you can also see the 200-day moving average here, and we've been trending downward for several months, right? So now we can potentially kind of start the U-turn. And if we do U-turn, we get back to this level, we're looking like $4 plus, which again would be bringing us closer to, in my opinion, quote unquote, fair value. And then you might get the news to come out. And even after this, these big pops here, we can see RSI sitting at 60.5. So here on the daily, we can keep going. We can pop potentially another 9-10% tomorrow and just go right back to $3 a share. Get eyes back on it, right? So we'll see. We might get back to 4 quicker than a lot of people realize. MACD was relatively flat. Now, obviously, curling upward here. Big day. Stock up almost 13%. Really healthy bounce after multiple rejections off the 50-day as well. And the last time it was up there was mid-August. And then before that goes all the way back to March, April. So this could, again, like we say with the stocks, we go through these lulls sometimes of 3, 4, 6 months. And then we start raging again for 2, 3, 5 months. And then we calm down and quiet for 2, 3 months. And then we start right? So we have the ebb and flow taking place here. So you just have to pick your spots. But I know that when they split, the stock was up at 10, and then it kind of immediately dropped down to 6 with lithium prices. People may have added, and now we're seeing the stocks down in the 3s and the 2s. So I understand a lot of you were upset, but like I say, take a step back. Remember why you bought it. You're probably, just buying shares when you can. You're probably planning to hold this for several years and wait for them to start mining and wait for the stock to grow. So I understand it's frustrating, but like we say, if you happen to find yourself with a couple extra bucks on your cash on hand down the road, if the stock's still down, keep adding, build your position, lower your cost basis, and, hopefully in 2-3 years time, it does work out well for you. But looking pretty decent here in the technicals. RSI on the weekly still sitting here very low, sitting down here at 40. So that's what I mean. Here in the short term, we could have these big pop days, and then we could pull back, 3, 4, 5%, have some people take profits. But I think we're kind of stepping here on the up and up now with some bullish momentum. And you can see we have a lot of action here in the high 3s and the 4s. Top Bollinger Band on the weekly, 390. 50-day moving average now curling downward and could potentially kind of drop and now curl upward, right? So, almost looking like, what is that, like sine or cosine, right? You guys, where are my calculus? Where are my calculus people out there? But you can see top Bollinger Band here, 390, 50-day moving average, 466. Other daily 200-day moving average was about 420. Shout out, spark it. But in my opinion, I do think we get back up to the high 3s and the 4s. I really do. And again, if we immediately go back to this resistance trend line, we're looking at 3.5, I think, minimum. So I think it's very doable. Again, a lot more RSI room on the weekly time frame, which means that over the next weeks, 4, 5, 6 weeks, we can potentially just go up and up and up till this hits around 70, and we may find ourselves at 370, 385, right? So we do have some potential here from these $2 levels. I'm curious. I just want to look at the pivot points real quick. I'll let you go. We have a point right here at 277, which, no. Okay, wait. All right, so if we immediately go up, yeah, we're looking at like 281. We have the pivot point there, 277. Stock hit 272. So we may just immediately pop up to 277 and maybe just kind of flatten out there. And we'll see if it wants to fight and break up to that trend line and go into the 280s. So we'll have to keep an eye on that level, 277 again on the weekly. If we switch over to the daily, we can see 286, our next resistance level. And again, if we immediately go up here, we're looking at like 281. This is what, midday tomorrow. But if we do get to that 285, again, that technically would be above, that would be above this old support level that the stock was above, which would signal bullish momentum, and that's why I'm saying I think we see a rally back up to 3.5. After that, next pivot point, 327. It just looks bullish to me. We're looking at all these pivot points, the 280s, the 330s, but in my opinion, I really do think it just goes up and up. I really do. And if we do get back to 420, we're looking at, about a 1.5 move on a $270 stock, which would be north of 50%, because 50% would be $1.35. So you can potentially stand to make roughly 60% from this level after a 13% pop today if the stock just retraces back to this 200-day of 420. And even if we go up here, 327, we'll call it 3.25. That's roughly a 50% move on a 270 stock, which is, I believe, a touch below 20%. So if you do have the capital on hand to jump in and jump out, you do stand to make potentially a quick 17, 18, 20, 22, 25% return. And of course, again, like we said, if we go above 4, you might make 40, 50, 60% gains. So only time will tell, but, shout out to a lot of you guys, because I know you guys are pumped about LAC, and every time we do an update, you guys, you always give the video a thumbs up, which of course I appreciate, and you always drop your comments saying, yeah, in 2-3 years, I like this one, or, yeah, I started buying it, at like 5, 6 a share, and now it's down here in the 2s. I try to add every chance I can. I'm holding it for the next 3 years, 5 years. So you guys seem pretty pumped and amped about this one, so we're always going to keep an eye on it. And in my opinion, I think here in the short term, I think you start to see some momentum come back into the stock here. But that's pretty much it. So I'll end it there. Once again, this is Stocks by the Numbers. I want to thank you guys for stopping by. If you have any questions, oh my goodness. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, drop it down in the comments section. I'm usually pretty quick to reply. thumbs up algorithm, right? That helps me get more eyes on the channel. And of course, subscribe to the channel. That is our handshake agreement. That is how you help me help you. But more importantly, moving forward, like I always say, I understand that markets are rocky, they're volatile, and they are very uncertain. So I want to wish all of you success. I hope everyone makes a couple of dollars. Thank you for your time. Have a good day.